Good evening everyone, welcome to Kimbers Kitchen. Tonight we're going to be doing steak and ale pie with potatoes. This is all going to be prepared in the slow cooker so it can be put in the night before, and then to bake the pastry off we're going to finish it off in the oven. So what you're going to need to make this recipe is a nice piece of beef shin. Beef shin, I've been told by my local butcher, is one of the best slow cooking type of beefs you can get. If we do this in the oven overnight, it's going to just fall apart. It's going to be absolutely beautiful in a pie. To go with this, I'm going to be just using any normal white potatoes. Onions, I like to go for red ones myself. They've got a nice flavour to them. Real ale, I'm going to be using 1 to 2 bottles of this. Just going to see how well it covers when I put it inside the slow cooker. And I'm cheating, I'm using Just Roll, ready to roll out and use puff pastry. You could, if you were feeling adventurous, make your own, but the amount of effort that goes into it, it's just as easy just to buy it. So let's go straight to step 1. The first thing we're going to do is carve the meat up into small thin slices to go into the slow cooker. Once you've finished this and it's all into cubes, you might be left with some fatty bits. Normally I'd chuck these away, but because we're making a sauce for the pies, I'm going to leave these in the slow cooker, and when the sauce is done, take them out, give them to my dog, she'll love them. Next up, we're going to roughly dice these red onions. We don't want them too fine, otherwise they'll shrivel up in the slow cooker. So now, in our preheated slow cooker, we're going to add the beef, including the fatty bits that I mentioned, and the red onions, and then the most important part, the real ale. Now when I open this, I'm going to pour it on, see how well it covers. So we're just going to add another bottle in here. If there's any left over, once you've finished it, enjoy a nice drink. I've put the lid on the slow cooker. We're just going to let the meat and the onions and the beer cook on high overnight for 7 to 8 hours. Then when I get up in the morning to go to work, switch my slow cooker off, just leave it to cool during the day. Then when I get home, we'll do the next step of potatoes. So the meat's been doing about 7 hours in the slow cooker. It's very tender, everything's cooked through nicely. The next step is going to be to slice up the potatoes. Now we don't want these too small because otherwise they'll shrivel up. You're going to want them in sort of inch cubes. So let's go through and chop all these up. So once these are all cubed up, we're just going to put them into a pan of boiling water, boil them for 4 or 5 minutes until they've just taken a bit of the hardness away, because otherwise if you put them in the pan with the pies, it's just going to be too hard. So as you can see, because the meat's just been cooked in beer alone, it's gone quite thin as the sauce. So what we're going to need to do is drain the meat and the onions off and just leave the sauce in a bowl so we can thicken this up with some corn syrup. So what I've done, I've just sieved the meat and onions off. What I'm going to do now is boil this up, and in a separate cup put a few tablespoons of corn flour powder and water and make a paste, and slowly add this into the gravy mixture until it thickens up. And you can also add a bit of salt and pepper to season while you're at it to taste. So in a large mug, or extra large in this case, I've put a couple of tablespoons of corn flour and some boiling water, and we're just going to mix this up until we've got a thick fluid. You don't want any lumps at all, otherwise this can ruin your gravy. So as you can see now, we've got quite a thick gloppy fluid. On the stove, I've got my gravy heating up. Once this gets warm, we're going to gradually add in the corn flour mixture into the gravy until we get the right thickness into the gravy. And let this come up to the boil before adding any more, so it will thicken up as it cooks through. It's starting to thicken up now, it's coming to the boil. What I'm just going to add in for the finishing touch is a couple of tablespoons of gravy granules, which I've just dissolved in some boiling water. Stir this through. I'm just going to let it come to the boil while the potatoes are just boiling. So I run the gravy and the potatoes through sieves just to make sure that all the bits had come out of the gravy so we didn't get any lumps, and the potatoes drained all the water off. I've combined them all up in this big bowl here. This makes sure that the potatoes will take on some of the flavour, and then you've just got to let this cool for about an hour, because otherwise it's going to make the pastry go very sloppy. So just put this bowl in a cold place and allow it to cool for about an hour, and then we can move on to the next bit. Once the mixture's cooled, I've decanted them into small pie trays, and now we're going to just easily put a puff pastry lid on top of each pie and press it down with a fork. And there we have 4 nice size puff pastry meat and potato pies. These go into an oven about 180 to 200 degrees. Maybe just put a bit of egg and milk wash on the top, which will just help brown them off. Serve them with some lovely veg and you've got yourself a tasty meal.